There's the pass to Leitner. Puts it up. Yes!
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Cameron Chronicles. I'm your host, Ranjan Jindal, here joined by my co-host, Caleb Dudley. Caleb, how are you doing today, man?
I'm good. Good to be back.
Yeah, happy Friday, everyone. Exciting day. Today, we're going to preview a big game for Duke men's basketball coming up tomorrow, or I guess we're recording it on a Friday, but if you're listening to it on Saturday, it's Saturday at 4:30 at Wake Forest. We'll preview that, and we have Sean Kennedy of the Old Gold and Black, so he'll be coming on later in the podcast. But we're also going to recap Duke's win against Boston College on the road, a game that started out pretty close, but Duke really pulled away in the second half. And since then, Duke's had the week off for the whole week, so we'll kind of talk about that and preview the matchup this weekend. But first, this podcast is brought to you by Duke Stores. Support your favorite Duke team. Duke Stores is home to the only collection of merchandise in the world that comes to you straight from Duke University. Go to shop.duke.edu for all of your Duke merch. All right, so let's start off with that Boston College game. Over on the road, Duke won 88-63. But like I mentioned, especially in that first half, it was close. Boston College had, the lead for a good amount. I think up to maybe 7 points at one point, 7-point lead. I mean, but then Duke really settled in and dominated in the second half. I'll just start with your takeaways. What did you see from that game, and maybe what can Duke learn from kind of a tight one on the road, at least to start?
Yeah, I've got two things. I'll start with, the kind of thing that relates to the game being close. Obviously, Kaman Malawach was in foul trouble, 4 fouls, played 17 minutes against the Eagles. But I thought Duke is still continuing to do a good job to just adapt to, playing without Malik Brown. And especially with Malawach in foul trouble, you don't really have an established backup center. Patrick Gongba played 14 minutes, which might be close to a high for him, especially in an important game like this. But Mason Gillis playing small ball 5 is definitely a thing that Coach Shire is trying out. It seems to be working pretty well. Obviously, Cooper Flagg inside can also play the 5 defensively if needed. So I thought, it's just encouraging to see how they adjust to foul trouble and still win by 25 without their, best center. And then the other thing was just Tyrese Proctor. One of his best games in a Blue Devil uniform, probably 20 points, 3 for 7 from 3. Obviously, Con Knippel was over 5, kind of an off night, but I thought Proctor's really impressed me. Yeah,
you mentioned BC, the matchup down inside. Chad Benning really got his way for the majority of it. Somebody was comparing him to like DJ Burns inside, the way he had, touch like Burns, and he was really able to shoot over Malawach and kind of bully him inside. He finished with 19.7 of 11 and got to the line, and really did his thing. So he was, when you look at Wake Forest moving forward, we'll talk about Efton Reed in a second, but that is something to watch, and that, they're both bigger bodies and can maybe affect Malawach. But like you said, Gillis came in and did a good job. I think offensively, initially, Duke was a little bit, there's a little bit of nerves there. I know Cooper Flagg, it was kind of a homecoming, and people were chanting at him, and Con was over 5 as well. And especially our Dom Fenoglio wrote a sidebar about this article, like, Duke is going to be heavily favored for the rest of the way, and, these teams are playing with nothing to lose. So especially with how dominant Duke has been, if it doesn't go Duke's way to start the first 10 minutes, which it can in any given basketball game, it can make the players a little bit tight and a little bit nervous, and I think you saw that a little bit. But I was impressed with how they responded and how they finished in the second half, especially defensively, completely shutting down Boston College, and then also playing a little bit more free, getting to the line and stuff like that. Cooper got to the line 11 times, which is big, and Proctor's threes. And then Isaiah Evans came in the second half too, and really lit it up from beyond the arc. So good for him, and a good way for Duke to face some adversity, but also learn to overcome it. All right, we'll be right back, and we'll talk with Sean Kennedy of the Old Gold and Black to preview the Wake Forest game this weekend. All right, well, welcome back to the Cameron Chronicles. We are here joined by Sean Kennedy. He is the sports editor of the Old Gold and Black, Wake Forest's student newspaper. Sean, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me.
So we'll just start off with the most recent contest for Wake Forest. I think everyone in the state watched that game. It was a big one. Wake Forest defeated North Carolina 67-66 in a, kind of back and forth game, kind of a weird game, especially in the first half. Could you just take us through some of your overall reactions to that game and how big of a win it was for Wake Forest this season?
Yeah, it really provided a lot of momentum for the Demon Deacons, especially because we needed to have one at home. We had gone away to Virginia Tech the weekend before and beat them pretty handily in the second half. Didn't get off to a great start, especially because Carolina had gone up around 10 points within the first 5 minutes of the game. And it really showed resilience, which was something that the Demon Deacons haven't showed all that often. Um, in their losses to Texas A&M and to Florida, they'd go down very quickly and not be able to come back. And then to go against Carolina, who, say what you want about their season, they're still a top half team in the ACC. To go against them and be able to come back not only in the first half, but then finish it off in the second half, it was really huge for the Demon Deacons.
Yeah, and that game kind of capped off a 6 game winning streak and one that's continuing for Wake Forest. What do you think has been the key to the 6 game winning streak for the Demon Deacons? Has there been anything that they've specifically improved on from the beginning of the year that you've seen?
Yeah, well, one of those big key factors is just the emergence of Hunter Salas once again. In those 6 games, he's had double-digit scoring, along with Cam Hildreth has had, I think, averaging 21 points over the past 4 games. And having those two as main reliable scoring guards has been very huge for the Demon Deacons, especially within this past 6 game winning streak. Undefeated since Christmas is a huge feat. The way that the schedule had worked out was that we had a lot of games in November, but then in December, I think we only had 4 or 5 scheduled games,
Mm.
and that was something that Steve Forbes was really huge on, is being able to practice finally and being able to play and import their systems and change some things around. Within the past few games, Tyler Johnson has come into the starting lineup and he's become a huge factor. And all these tiny little tweaks in December have really tuned up the Team Deacons to become better than they really were at the beginning of the season. So yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a big factor. Okay.
Yeah, going forward, obviously Wake Forest by the numbers is one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the conference. But they still have a bunch of quality individual shooters. What do you think's kind of contributed to that? Has it just been bad shot selection, or just somewhat unlucky, or what do you think?
Steve Forbes would totally he would love this question because at the beginning of the season, they were really bad from deep. And
Yeah.
I will say that we have lost some quality through the transfer portal. Damari Monsanto was a huge 3-point shooter for us.
Yeah.
And he had been an amazing momentum shifter in the way that he was able to create threes, make threes, and shots all around the floor. Parker Fredrickson was really supposed to come into that role. He still hasn't necessarily broken out of a slump.
Right.
I think every Demon Deacon is really looking forward to that. Otherwise, it's really become sort of, in terms of shot selection, we've become a really mid-range team. I mean, Cam Hildreth and Hunter Salas, when they're getting their points, it's either at the rim or in their spots in the mid-range. Hunter actually reminds me a lot of DeMar DeRozan and how
Mm.
often he's able to get to that mid-range and shoot that mid-range and make it. It'll be exciting to see whether Demon Deacons can get out of that slump. I mean, even against Carolina, the players that made threes were our worst statistical shooters in Tyler Johnson and Trayvon Spillers. Trayvon Spillers hadn't really taken any threes leading up to the season, and now he's become somebody that you kind of have to guard. But otherwise, yeah, it's been a pretty rough stretch from deep, especially this season.
Yeah, definitely. You've mentioned a host of players, Salas and Hildreth, obviously, veterans in that backcourt. Is there a player that's either, maybe less talked about or coming off the bench or something that you think Duke fans should keep an eye on for this game that maybe could have an impact Saturday?
Absolutely. Maybe not off the bench
Yeah.
per se, but I think that the two to really make sure to keep an eye on are Spillers and Efton Reed.
Hmm.
Reed in the game at Cameron last year, he fouled out very early. Not necessarily fouled out, but had 2 fouls very quickly. Forced a guy named Matthew Marsh, who's now off the team, to play more often, and and the Demon Deacons struggled because of it. And
Yeah.
that's become a very big impact. He's become a very big impact player this season on the defensive end, where his stats may not show up on the stat sheet as much, but in terms of defensive rating, the Demon Deacons are way better with him on the floor. Same thing goes for Trayvon Spillers, who was somebody that we hadn't had any idea about until the NIT game last season, where we played against App State and played against him. And he has, I think he had 4 blocks against Carolina. He's just become a very complimentary piece. So in order to stop the guys like Flag and Maluach and Kneppel, you got to have some size, especially to go against somebody like Cooper, who's 6'9", and so on. So it'll be exciting to see whether Spillers and Efton can really get going in this coming game.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of right off of that. Obviously, Cooper Flag and Kamal Maluach have kind of dominated some teams inside and been able to draw a lot of fouls. Has foul trouble inside kind of been a thing for Wake Forest this season, or do you think they'll match up pretty well with Flag and Maluach?
Yeah, so I think Efton especially has dealt with some bad foul spells. Luckily enough, we have a pretty competent backup in Churchill Abbas, who came from DePaul, transfer from DePaul, and he's been terrific in his spurts this season. But yeah, I'd say in the Carolina game especially, I think there were 27 fouls overall within the first half between both teams. It got very a lot of people fouled out or of the first half very quickly. It'll be exciting to see what kind of refs there are and how they play them.
Yeah.
Especially because Cooper is able to draw fouls very quickly, and like you said, there's a huge size differential. So it'll be exciting to see how the matchups work. I think that in terms of physicality, Duke's going to bring the best physicality that we've seen all season.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great analysis there. I don't want to put you on the spot, but how do you think this game's going to go? Do you have any predictions? Maybe a final score prediction, or yeah, any of that?
Yeah, so that's a little bit hard.
Sorry.
It's the sort of thing where I'd say that this is our best chance at a marquee win this season.
Yeah.
Especially because when we visit you guys back in March in Cameron, it's always hard to win at Cameron. I mean, it's the hardest thing to do in the conference, quite frankly. So, so for us, I'd like to say that we eke out a win like last year, but then again, I mean, this team for you guys is the quality is so much farther ahead, especially at this time in the season. The roster construction is really good. Shire has done just a terrific job. You know, I want to say that we win, right? Because as a student, I'm a student journalist, but I'm a student first. You got to hope that you're able to get the win. I will say that I know for a fact that the athletic department and the security has worked on our court rushing. This past week, there's been a big emphasis on letting the players get off the floor.
He was okay. He was okay. No worries.
Hopefully it happens again. Hopefully we don't have another flip situation. That would be really bad. But yeah, so and then in terms of score, I think both teams are going to score. I think Salas is going to get his. I think Hillsworth is going to get his. I think that Knippel and I think that Cooper are going to get theirs. I'd say somewhere in the mid to low 70s for each team. I don't think that the spread is going to go farther than 4 points each way. I think it's going to be a tight game, but I think it's going to be just as every Wake Forest and Duke team has done within the past few years. It's going to be a classic that you have to watch. So I'd say choosing one. 75, 72 Wake, but I'm not gonna hold myself to that.
That's okay. No, thank you so much for giving that. I know it's tough. Just lastly, talk about what's on the old Gold and Black. What can our listeners read on the page? Yeah, just feel free to shout out what's going on there.
Yeah, totally. So we are at wfuogb.com. We're trying to have as much analysis as possible. We just had a turnover in terms of staff. So my former sports co-editor, Andrew Braun, is now moving into a managing role. But despite that, we've really tried to up our Deeks This Week podcast, which should be coming up within the next few days,
Awesome.
um, where we talk about all the different things going on. We just had two major head coaching changes, along with uh, the uh, the game coming up. So at wfuogb.com, at wfuogb sports on all the major platforms, Instagram, Twitter, X, however you like to call it. And yeah, if you want to follow Demon Deacon at Demon Deacon Sports, that's where we are.
Awesome. Well, Sean, thank you so much for joining us. You did a great job, man.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, that was Sean Kennedy of the Old Gold and Black. Now we'll talk about the game a little bit. He said 75-72.
Yep.
Okay, Caleb, what's your score?
Yeah, I was going to go with the exact same score I was thinking when Sean said that, just the other way around. So Duke 75, Wake Forest 72. Duke hasn't won at Wake Forest since Paolo was here, Coach K's last season. That game, him and Mark Williams outdueled Alondis Williams. I think that's kind of what happens again. I think Hunter South is going to definitely kind of explode. This is kind of his chance to both prove his draft stock and get Wake Forest their big win of the season. But I think Cooper Flagg and Conconipple will do just enough to eke it out for Duke.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because he was talking about the mid-range a lot for Salas and Hildreth, and it's going to be interesting if they get those shots because Duke has so much length, especially guards defensively. Like, I think Duke's really going to force Wake Forest to shoot threes, and if Wake Forest makes them, they might win it. But because they've just been so inconsistent all year from behind the arc, I think they might have a little bit of a lower scoring outburst. I see something like 77-68 Duke type of thing. I could see it being close for a little bit, but I think they score in the 60s and Duke is able to win one. But should be a fun game regardless. Caleb, I know you're going down there tomorrow, so definitely check that one out. All right, let's do our stock up, stock down, our weekly ACC stock up, stock down. I feel like there's been some really big games in the league this past week. So Caleb, I'll start with you. Yeah,
I'll start with stock up. I'll go with Stanford. They're on a 2-game win streak. Didn't really peg them as a team that would make a lot of noise in the ACC, but they may have the best center in the ACC, Maxime Reynaud, and we saw Jalen Blakes have quite the game against North Carolina, the former Blue Devil. So Stanford right now sits at 5-3 in the ACC, which is tied for 5th. So I've been very impressed. They're 10-1 at home this year, so impressed with Stanford. And then stock down to go SMU. SMU, when Duke went down to Moody Coliseum, seemed like maybe a top flight contender in the ACC, and seems like maybe they're a little bit of a paper tiger. Louisville just went down and absolutely smacked them down in Dallas, and I don't think SMU's bad by any stretch of the word, but just has not really unfolded for them the way an ACC play I thought it might. So
yeah, I my stock down. I almost feel bad for doing this because it's a stock that's already so down. I don't know how much more down the stock can get, but it's Miami. Miami's 0-8 in the league, and the reason I have them here is just because even after the Duke game, the last 2 games have, believe it or not, been worse for the Hurricanes. You talked about SMU. SMU went to Miami and won 117-74. Yeah, that's just not overtime, obviously. It's 40 minutes of regulation basketball. 60 points and a half is just unacceptable for a team. And they followed that up with a 51-88 loss to Stanford, which is also, not very pretty. So Miami's on, rough stretch things. Obviously, Jim Larinaga left, and so there's a lot of uncertainty there. And they have scorers. It's just, they cannot string together a stop.
No.
And it's really hurt the team, and it's not good for the league if a team is this down in the net and Kemba.
Especially a team that went to the Final Four 2 years ago.
Right, exactly. So if a team that went to the Final Four 2 years ago is like that, and then a team who went to the Final Four last year is near the bottom of the league. So, stock down Miami. My stock up is Clemson. I feel like Clemson has kind of fallen under the radar a little bit after a few December losses and an early January one to Louisville. And partially because Clemson didn't have that many good wins in ACC play outside of those. They beat Wake, but last Saturday was probably Clemson's best win of the season in the ACC. and that was at Pittsburgh, a 78-75 win that went to overtime. Clemson jumped out to a big lead, but Pitt really came back. But the Tigers were able to beat Pitt for I think like the 11th or 12th straight time. It was something crazy there. But this team is once again extremely balanced. Chase Hunter is playing absolutely out of his mind right now. I think he's first team All ACC caliber. He's averaging 18 points a game. He had 20 against Pittsburgh, 23 against Syracuse. He's shooting from logo right now, and he's a great player. And him and Shefflin and Locken, they have a lot of quality and experienced pieces for the Tigers. I also think the ACC is just there's now this kind of 4-tier team with North Carolina's losses and SMU, like Duke, Clemson, Louisville, and Wake Forest, I think are kind of establishing themselves as kind of a core 4, and they're all playing so well. So I think that's good for the league.
Yeah.
Okay, so I alluded to NC State earlier, but Duke will be playing NC State on its first Saturday, Monday of the year. I think Duke's first Saturday, Monday.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Little big Monday action before the rivalry. So tell me a little about the Wolfpack. Obviously, we know what happened with them last year, but this is not the same team as evidenced by their record and success so far.
Yeah. Similar roster in some ways. Obviously, no DJ Burns is the big one there. Ben Middlebrooks is still there as their other their other big man, and they brought in Brandon Huntley Hatfield from Louisville.
Yeah,
but it just has not gone well. They just don't have the scorers really. They brought in Dontrez Styles and Marcus Hill in the transfer portal. Neither one of them have been spectacular. Neither one of them shot the ball very well. Jaden Taylor's back. He's been their best scorer by far. He's shooting 36% from 3. So he's had a pretty good year, but just has not been the kind of year they wanted after the Final Four. I think for Duke, I mean, playing at home, they're obviously going to be pretty mad about what happened last year. Even not many guys that are back, but I know Coach Shire and Tyrese Barker and Caleb Foster are going to be pretty upset about what happened last year with the Wolfpack, and so it'll just be a could be a letdown spot after a big win at Wake Forest, or chance to bounce back from a Wake Forest loss. We'll see. But just that stretch is important to have State right in the middle of Wake Forest and North Carolina to get a big win at home.
Yeah, like you mentioned, they've really struggled. They're kind of have some quality guards, but again, kind of like Wake Forest, they're not shooting the ball great from deep. At least their guards aren't, and they're not playing defense particularly well either. And I think the biggest thing for NC State is just late game situations. Like they have not been able to close out games. Their past 3 losses have all been they beat Notre Dame by 1, but lost to UNC by 2, lost to Virginia Tech by 3, and lost to Cal by 3 in their 3 most recent games. And so it's just been late game execution down the stretch. Also lost to Virginia by 3. So could be a good enough team to win a lot of those games and keep things close. But they've been on the losing side of all of them. I just don't think they're close enough to in talent to match up with Duke. But still a dangerous team, especially with a lot of returners from that Final Four team. They know how to win, obviously. But I think Duke is pretty comfortably takes this one. So a big week for Duke after that. They'll face North Carolina. We'll preview that game later, but today is the first day of the Chronicle. Today's and Friday of the Chronicle and Daily Tar Heel Rivalry Challenge. We'll talk about this more a little bit later, but basically it is our biggest donation campaign of the year. We compete with the Daily Tar Heel to see who can raise the most money, and it's the best way that we get our funding to do the work that we do as student journalists. And so we have great coverage of the rivalry. We'll be having it all this week, and then in our socials on Twitter and Instagram at Duke Basketball and Chronicle Sports, and then at the Duke Chronicle on Instagram, you'll see a bunch of cool videos that we have. We're playing the Daily Tar Heel in basketball this afternoon, so that should be fun. But if you can, any contribution is definitely appreciated, and we love all the support we can get. So definitely check out all that content. We'll have great stuff from the Wake Forest game. Caleb and Dom, I know, will write some great articles. So yeah, should be a fun week in North Carolina basketball, I guess, because we're playing 3 North Carolina teams back to back to back. Yeah, anyway, so have a great weekend. Thank you again for listening, and enjoy your basketball. For Caleb Dudley, I'm Ranjan Jindal. This has been the Cameron Chronicles.